Hi, everybody. Welcome to Small Town Big Gays. We are the big gays. That's not how I usually say it. We are the gays who are too big for how small of a town this is. I'm Chance.
And I'm Travis.
And we are joined today. The setup is different if you're watching this on YouTube. We are joined today by Andrew and Simone Patrie. Andrew is the author of Clumsy Love, A Father's Journey, Parenting His Transgender Daughter. Available wherever fine books are sold, I suppose. Yeah. How are you guys?
I'm great.
I'm doing well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's just jump right into the nitty gritty. So, are you an Eau Claire native originally?
I am.
Okay, cool. So you kind of like grew up in this area and
I did.
and everything. Awesome. So, wow, I just lost my train of thought.
You're doing great, sweetie. Simone, let's start with you. So tell us about like early childhood, kind of when you realized, take us on the journey. Tell us about yourself.
So I have this vivid memory of when I was in preschool. I would always daydream about me being a grown up with long hair, being so iconic. And it was really hard for me to be categorized as a boy, girls go on this side, boys go on this side, girls versus boys, all of that stuff. And that was kind of the first time that I realized, wait, why am I not with the girls? Because I'd never been gendered. You don't really gender like 2-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And so when I was, for the first time, I was like, wait, I'm not a girl. Like in my head, I was a girl. I saw myself as a girl. I saw myself with my other girl classmates. So it was really kind of confusing and scary.
So at home, I'm assuming you didn't have many conversations about like gender and stuff. It was just letting you be who you are.
Yeah.
And
my fairy wings.
Yeah, love that.
Love those.
Okay, yeah, we all did,
I still have mine.
Okay. And so I'm assuming like family and friends at this point were just supportive of just kind of letting you be who you are. And so you hadn't really like thought about it. And then the classroom was kind of the first time where you're like, okay, well, this is something and something feels a little different.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you feel comfortable right away, like having that conversation with your parents? Or?
Oh yeah. Well, as soon, I know it's written in the book, but I was watching a show called What Would You Do, if you know that, where they have like social scenarios and see how the public reacts. And an episode was with a trans boy who wanted to get gender affirming haircut. And I didn't know the word transgender at that point. And then when I found that out, I was like, oh, wait, that's me. And I brought my dad in and I said, hey, that's who I am. No fear, no anything, just straightforward.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I think you were third grade maybe by that point.
9 years old.
Had you and your partner like had any conversations about this, like privately between yourselves? Like had you had some inklings maybe or?
Yeah, I think I had talked about this before. I had self-published a collection of poems in 2016, and one of the poems, which was written back in 2012, was about Simone, using her dead name then, because it was before any of this was kind of on our radar, but it was a poem about just sort of noticing, here's a kid who is not conforming to sort of these societal sort of definitions and expectations of being a boy, and just, and wanting to celebrate that, but also worried about, what does that mean on the playground? And that sort of became like a harbinger, because it was like that poem. And then within 3 years ish, I think, is when the conversation that Simone was referring to on the couch with What Would You Do happened. So I think in between there, Adrian and I had conversations. I don't think I think the word transgender was probably, but it was just when we didn't want to go down that pathway, and not because we were, opposed to it, but I think it just meant like, by this point in 2015, gay marriage is legalized, and I had started to see more acceptance in the halls of the high school where I teach, right, in terms of like same-sex couples holding hands and that. So it felt like maybe Simone is gay, right? Like it was kind of like we didn't want to entertain that other thought, because we were like, what does that mean? Will that lead to her suffering? Those kinds of thoughts. So we didn't really want to acknowledge it. I'm sure it was in both our minds, but we just didn't really talk about that until, Simone kind of forced the conversation that day, and that was with me first, and then talking to Adrian about it after.
Okay. So as parents, do you have any other children? No, just Simone. Okay. Was it a deliberate decision you all made to, like, with realizing that didn't have the conversation about gender. And I feel like so many times parents like immediately like, you know, the boys wear blue and the girls wear pink. And it's like, these are the boy toys, these are the girls toys. Did you deliberately, like, as parents decide as like growing up, like not to have those things in the home, or like not to like make gender a big deal? Because I feel like so many times parents do that. And so was that a deliberate decision, or was it just kind of like this is just how we are, we don't really care about that?
That's a great question. I feel like we kind of just rolled with it. Initially, I think we probably were getting, you know, boy stuff, right? Like quote unquote, for you. But then someone quickly sort of like, no, I'd rather play with dolls, right? I'd rather
loved my Barbies,
put the fairy wings on. And so we're like, okay. And we were always, I think, comfortable with that in the space of our home, but we started to worry about what does that mean when we take it public. And so in the book, the first time we did that was with family at a retreat in northern Wisconsin with the fairy wings. That was a compromise because there was also a dress that Simone was very fond of wearing, and that I think felt. I think I mentioned that in the book. It felt like it was that made a statement as opposed to like, you know, fairy wings or Barbies. Like, whoa. So for a long time, we just sort of said, you know, like, you're fine doing that at home, but in public, we're kind of a little, you know, we didn't get into the details of this. So we were just a little more conscious of like, maybe that's something we don't do, because we were worried, you know, about how the outside world would react to it. But yeah, I think as parents, we didn't really want to like, kind of like chain her play to either, like it had to be this because you're a boy. So you had that room, right, to kind of, but I think it's when outside started looking in, that's when maybe we got a little more self-conscious as parents. But no, we were never restrictive, I think, in your play.
Did your like family and friends, like when you started having these conversations and started kind of, I guess, exposing them to the fairy wings and the Barbies and things that would, you know, kind of put a little light on that to other people from the situation, did you start like getting some like feedback from that, whether it be negative or positive? And like, how did you handle that situation?
It's great. Yeah, I think family first, and that was generally very positive. Like, you know, your aunt and uncle, right, and your cousins always were very sort of accepting of who you were at that age. And my parents, my mom for sure was right there. My dad was kind of remained a mystery, you know, but he did things like, you know, when we eventually, when you changed your name, we had a ceremony first with family before we tried to take it through the courts. And, you know, he was there that day. You know, he helped carry the cake with your new, you know, Simone on it. So that was great. But I think what I remember most being kind of profoundly was we had, one of the houses that next door to us was a rental. We moved in, it was a rental. It remained a rental up until just recently. So it was kind of this, you know, like transient, right, in terms of like who was going to be there. But we ended up, there's a family that moved in, and this would have been, I don't know, I think in the book it talks about like around 2011, 2012. And they had a daughter about Simone's age. And he is from India, and wife from Minnesota. So that kind of struck us, right, as like in this, you know, fairly white suburban, you know, Eau Claire neighborhood. And he turns out he's an anthropology professor at the university. And we just sort of struck this. So our first meeting is in that book. And I remember being very defensive and guarded around your play. And but he quickly kind of broke the ice. And more than anything, I think they were a family who encouraged us, like sort of normalized, like, this is great, this is fine, like, you know. And part of how we connected initially was before you were born, and when I was in grad school, I had been asked by some students to take over the GSA at North, and it, you know, it's like, who's this, you know, straight cis guy? Like, why would I, you know? And I took a course with Bob Nolan at the university, and it was a queer theory class, and that just exploded, you know, like my perceptions. I think I remember the idea of binary thinking was something that that class had challenged me in such a way that, you know, and I was kind of resistant at first, and then like, just through conversations and through readings, and like how that, you know, changed my perspective so much. And so I always kind of look back at that class and feel like that was, you know, in many ways kind of maybe helping foreshadow without me knowing, like what's, in terms of parenting. But Judith Butler was a writer that I got introduced to in that course. And it turns out that my neighbor also taught Judith Butler in her class. So suddenly we're having, I write about this in the book, we're drinking beer and I just finished mowing the lawn and there are two guys over the fence line and we're talking about gender theory and while the kids are playing. So they were hugely instrumental, I think, in getting us to think like, okay, like, because we did feel very, very insular at the time. And some of that was by choice. We just sort of like kept this to ourselves. We were late at getting on, my wife and I were late at getting on social media. So we just felt like we don't know where to go. Like we don't know anybody else who has a trans child. Of course, now there are awesome resources out there, including, on Facebook. And so they were really instrumental in like helping us feel normal about this and like being comfortable around other people and kind of going forward. As far as, negatives, I think for the most part, pretty fortunate. Like I can't speak to your experiences as a, going through the school system. But I can just say like in terms of when you and I would be out in public or something like that, I think I was always expecting there to be maybe a comment, like especially with the dress and that. But, for the most part, people just sort of, if they had it, they kept it to themselves. And so I never necessarily experienced that, like coming at me, like, what are you doing? Why is that kid wearing a dress? But it's definitely something I had to kind of struggle with it because I felt like I was always so defensive when I was just expecting and waiting for that. But for the most part, I think there's been a pretty good support group around us of family and friends. And so
I want to get more into Simone's story, but I just have a few more questions to kind of like back up into this of, so as a cis male, what made you decide, I guess I'm trying to think of how to word this, like, we as queer people don't make the decision to be queer, but you as a cis male make the decision to support the queerness in us. So as someone who grew up in the Midwest, probably not a ton of exposure to the queer lifestyle as you kind of have touched base on a little bit, what kind of like made you click with that? And like, what has made you be open-minded to that? And like, did you think of it as like a clear decision, or has it always just been something in the back of your mind? Or like, did your parents kind of raise you to be more open-minded? I'm always curious on like the cis story of like how they become allies and supportive in that community.
Boy, and a number of things were kind of flooding. I think I'll just kind of grab things as I think about them. I think I did grow up in a fairly open household in terms of I think I didn't really recognize it at the time, but as I've gotten older and especially as I've become a parent myself, I look back and go, oh, okay, that was really neat what my mom and dad kind of did. But our house was just very open to everyone. And my sister, I have a younger sister by a couple years and very different people. So, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon on a Saturday to see like, her cheerleading friends over with, the guys with like long heavy metal hair and, outrageous t-shirts on, and we're all kind of mingling together. Right. And so my parents just kind of, they thought, well, later on I asked them about this and like, well, we just knew where you were. Like, so we were like, fine, like we're going to keep our house open and we always knew where you were. And, I think she was very quick to admit that, yeah, sometimes the people who we maybe were a little leery of were like, turned out to be the sweetest, nicest people. And I said, yeah. So I think that sort of like maybe instilled a kind of openness in me, but also I had very much kind of felt like an outsider growing up. And I talk about this in the book. An adopted kid, knew that from, as far back as I can remember, and never thought there was anything too strange about that. Although sometimes like, kids in the playground, if they found out they didn't know how to quite respond to that, like, sorry. I'm like, no, it's good. Right. And I also was a big, like I really gravitated towards heavy metal music at a young age and horror movies. And especially in the 80s, those things were very maligned. And so I felt like none of my friends listened to the music I listened to or liked the kind of films. So I had a hard time sort of connecting. So I kind of withdrew into books. I loved reading as a kid and then trying to write my own stories and watching movies. And I didn't feel like, I don't think lonely as a kid, but I think I just sort of felt like, I just don't really fit or relate well with, just I could be social. I didn't have a problem, in school or anything like that, but I just sort of felt like I was just me doing my thing. So that's not the same as the experience that you went through, but I think as in parenting you and certainly writing the book, I was thinking back on ways that I tried to kind of make connections with Simone, and so feeling a little bit like, outside of my peer group, or there were times I can remember like my dad really was a sports guy, and this is what I knew this is what he wanted for me, and that's just not who I was. And in the book, it talks about kind of one of those family stories, right, where I walked off in the middle of a t-ball game that he was coaching. And I think that was really hard for him. But to his credit, he sort of reframed and said, well, okay, you're this weird kid. What do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to go see Friday the 13th Part 6 at the drive-in. Like, okay, we'll do that. So again, I didn't really think about that much at the time, but as a parent now, I look back and go, what ways to try to like meet you where you were at. So I feel like, yes, that some of that upbringing then definitely kind of helped me with that. And I think in pursuing some of I didn't really want to write about the adoption with this because I thought it was going to muddy the themes too much, but it turned out to be the exact thing the book needed. There were things that I discovered when I went looking for information about my birth parents. For example, for about a month, I had a different name. So I was Kevin, and then when my parents adopted me, I became Andrew. So again, different in the sense of like the transgender experience, right, of the dead name, and then but it felt like it was a way to connect with her when she was younger, to say like, hey, I know you want to change your name, and again, this was Adrian and I are kind of processing all of this, but it gave me at least something to kind of anchor to. I'm like, I had a different name. Lots of people changed it, so, yeah. So I guess a combination of just that open house, I think when I was a kid, and also maybe that, feeling of alienation from, I think is just always, sort of aligned my sympathies with people or with groups, who are also feeling like a certain kind of marginalization, right, in society. So I think that, but that's not to say like I grew up within these same systems. So I can recall being younger, and you just sort of drop the slurs, like I remember going back to watch some of my favorite 80s movies with Simone, and I don't know, I think every one we watched, there was just like, it had to be written in the script or didn't get greenlit. So yeah, and I had to have kind of a reckoning too with my past. And I think I was fortunate to have a good group of friends eventually in high school who are all these misfits, but a lot of what they did was just kind of read books. And there were people in the group who were much more well-read and thoughtful than I was. And if I like slipped up and made a joke, right, I remember this vividly. My friend Jeremiah just like, hey, and like just stopping the conversation and like, you're my friend, I love you, but dude, no, this is, like, oh, I just thought it was funny. Like, yeah, but you understand, like, oh. So I think moments like that have imprinted upon me. And I've tried to like be a decent person. So I think when I get called out, for something, like it stays with me, and I'm going to try to kind of correct for that. And I think that queer theory class was huge as well. So yeah, I think there's just been, I've had, like I said, a sympathy for an interest in, and like I said, I try to acknowledge, my limitations too when I talk to kids in the GSA. I'm like, I'll be very upfront with them. And this came from a conversation with this neighbor that I was telling you about, Ari. I just said that, I understand that, what we talk about here, for me, like when I walk out of here, this isn't my lived experience, but this is your, and I have to remind myself, right, of that. And we talk about these issues. So I'm kind of very aware of my place and my position and what this means to them versus what it means to me. So again, it's all been very eye-opening and enriching. And I think there was a former student of mine, I don't know if Kari Rongstead was probably pretty close, was teaching in Madison, had just reached out. She had read the book and she just reached out, and there was a line that she wrote in her text message that just stuck with me. She said like, and what a great reminder of the incredible joy queerness brings to our lives. And I was just like, yeah, like, and that's that's you, right? Like you have brought this incredible amount of joy, to our lives, even though, despite whatever clumsy parenting was there along the way. So, and I feel like, and I felt the same way leaving the drag show. I remember leaning over to Adrian. I'm like, how can anyone possibly find anything threatening about this? It was just pure joy.
Well, you haven't been in the dressing room. That's why. You haven't found it threatening yet.
A question for Simone. What's it like to have parents that love you?
I feel really lucky.
Yeah.
It's been really nice.
With, the whole concept of clumsy love, like, it seems that you're doing a great job, because there's obviously like no guidebook for this, right? There's no guidebook for, hey, my child came out as transgender. Here's the next steps. Here's how I support them. Unless this, I admit I haven't read the book yet. Unless this is that guide. So, clumsy is a good start, and I think it seems like you feel supported. You feel
yes.
Great. So I think you're doing great. Briefly, I also wanted to go back to when you were talking about your friends who are more well-read, kind of correcting you. When you say gay, do you know what you say? That Hillary Duff PSA?
Yeah.
That's for people older than you.
I like Hillary Duff.
Okay. She was in a PSA that told people not to use gay as a slur. So that just popped in my head. Anyway, continue with the actual interview.
So Simone, you said at like home, you obviously just kind of lived your life, didn't think about it. And it was at school when you realized like, oh, this is the gender norms and this is what they're telling me I need to be, but I don't feel this. And then you had the conversation with your parents and you were kind of able to articulate a little bit of what that felt like for you. How was your experience? So at home, I feel like you probably had a pretty safe space, but obviously parents and ourselves, we can't be protected at all costs, and we have to be out in the public and in school where we're not as protected. What was your experiences like realizing that, and then like going forward with like, this is who I am, and trying to explain that and maybe give that explanation to people who maybe not quite understand it?
I would say I was really lucky. I had great experiences in school, a lot, at least in elementary school. I feel like hate is so learned. Like everybody was so accepting at that age. Like it wasn't anything weird to them. It was just, oh yeah, my friend is trans. And I feel like as kind of life progressed on, they became more hateful.
Yeah.
In high school. I definitely noticed a change in how they acted towards me. But I would say I had great experiences in elementary school, middle school, and high school. I had some teachers that were maybe a little confused.
Yeah.
And I was in Girls on the Run in 3rd grade, and some parents were upset about that, even though I was just running, being athletic. But yeah, I was really lucky. I had great experiences in school.
Was there the occasional comment, right? I mean, that there's one that you shared with me that's written in the book. So I'm just thinking,
and I handled it.
You did.
Love that. You're like, I'm not taking this. I love that. That's great. You kind of have to have that backbone, to survive as a queer person, for sure.
I mean, going back to like what you were saying about being on guard, like in public, that's kind of just that is an aspect of queer experience that I think a lot of us experience, or a lot of us live through without even realizing. It's like when you were talking about that, I was thinking, well, yeah, when I'm walking down the street at night with my husband, like I'm constantly on guard for someone to say something or do something, and that's kind of just part of the experience. So,
and yet obviously I'm not going to have that kind of, because if I'm just walking with
course.
Adrian, right? And
yeah,
it's so true. And I think that was another, just made me think of sort of a corollary here that I remember talking with Ari about, as a brown skinned man, is like, at the time I was used to wear this black hoodie everywhere. And he goes, if I wear that black hoodie and walk through a neighborhood tonight, that says something different than if you do it. And I was like, I just never thought about that. It was something to just take for granted, right? I'm just throwing on my black hoodie, going for a walk at dusk. But white skin, right? So yeah, so hearing you say that, I'm like, wow. So that there's another one of those moments. I'm like, yeah, like, so the guardedness, as a parent, but if I'm just being myself, that's not there, right? That's not, yeah.
Simone, with your friends, like from elementary school, have you like been able to maintain like friendships through like most of the years? Did your friends ever like treat you any differently once maybe they kind of clicked with what was going on? Anything like, did you have any experiences with that growing up, or?
I think my friend Izzy, we're still friends. I met her in 1st grade. And I actually went to Spain earlier this summer and she was my roommate there. So she's so sweet. I love her. But at least in middle school, I think I was treated with respect, like face to face, but I think there was always some of that underlying, like, oh, she's trans. So I felt a little maybe excluded in spaces that, you know, all the girls would go do this and I would just be kind of by myself, like, oh, let's all go to the bathroom right now. And then I'd just be like, oh, okay. And like, I just felt a little left out always. And I think it was not their fault inherently, just some of that underlying, oh, she's trans.
Yeah.
Did that improve as the years went on?
Yes. As more kind of, I think 2020 really shifted a lot of people's opinions because there was so much more research and trans people coming out and trans people online. I think it really helped people learn more about it.
Yeah. I do wonder, because as you wisely said, like hate is learned, you know, you're not born thinking trans bad.
Yep.
And you know, middle school, there always is that element of kids are just shitty.
Yeah.
Kids are shitty and they're annoying. And if it's not even anything, sometimes not to say none of this was transphobia. I'm sure, you know, there might have been some, but you know, sometimes kids are just like, you have a different hair color, you're out, and the redheads are in, shit like that. So
I identify as like a gender fluid. I don't really know what I am. I just kind of do whatever I feel I want to do.
No one knows.
Yeah, I don't know. No one knows, and that's okay.
We have a whole podcast trying to figure that out.
Yeah, almost on a year, and I still don't know. No. But like I have a lot of trans friends, and I am a huge advocate for the trans community just because I understand kind of what the experience is, but not fully. But do you ever just feel like there's days where you just like don't want to be identified as the trans person or like have that experience? Like I feel like so many of my friends just like want to just blend in and not do that. But then there's also people who celebrate it and like, I am trans, I'm proud of it. Do you have feeling for you and like how that looks for you? Are you okay kind of being a poster child, you know, for that experience? Or
I think I was definitely in that mindset. I just want to blend in. I just want to be like seen as a woman in the earlier stages of my transition, because, you know, as like trans people started to come out more and it became more known, I think that was a lot of people's first thoughts just for safety. But now that it's more accepted, I feel definitely way more proud of it, and I'd rather be just seen as a trans woman.
That's cool. I really love that. I feel like it's a moment where you can kind of just like embrace who you are instead of feeling like ashamed of who you are. Not that people who identify as not wanting to like have that trans journey or like be identified as a trans person isn't valid or anything like that. But I think there is something that comes and like embracing that and just being like, I am trans, I'm proud of it, and there's nothing to be ashamed behind it. Where I feel like sometimes they feel the need to like blend as like, you know, I am not good with words today. Yeah, blend it. You know what I'm saying? Like
defense mechanism.
Sure, that works. Yeah, I don't know. You know? Yeah.
I think a lot of stuff changed in high school for me, because I was so stuck on what other people thought of me as. Like if they saw me as a woman, if they remembered my name and didn't say my dead name, if they remembered my right pronouns. But now I just like don't care. You can call me he, him. You can call me my dead name because I know who I am inside and I don't need other people's validation.
Exactly. Yep.
And if I can share this was kind of a moment where your mom and I were like, okay, I think because we probably tended to, you know, for better or worse, sort of see you in that light. I remember we were thinking about colleges, and you know, some of the pitches that colleges will make. We have a LGBTQ floor, right? And I remember you were just like, I'm like, what? You wouldn't want to? You know, like. You didn't, I think at that point, or there was just like you were worried about like solely being defined, right? By that, like you want to be seen for their other aspects, right, to who you are and other interests. Yeah, so that was really kind of eye opening for me because and reminded me again of how sometimes we can kind of get narrow in our thinking. But I was just like, oh yeah, okay, that does make sense that you wouldn't necessarily. But I think we were thinking like, hey, you know, they got this floor, you know. So
yeah, I think that is like an interesting part of the queer experience of like. That part of just wanting to like feel quote unquote normal, even though that's really overrated, but just like not being defined as like the queer person. Like, you know, I'm a queer business owner, so it's always like, well, he's a queer business owner, where it's queer friendly, and it's like, yeah, shouldn't just every salon be that way? You know, like why do we have to say it's queer friendly? Like you should just be able to come in there and like get the gender affirming haircut that you want and not have to worry about what the other stylists are going to say or things like that. So it does like get monotonous to deal with that all the time. And it's like, can I just be a human and not have to be defined by this one little part of me? But then also at the same point, I'm like so incredibly proud of that part of like, because it was something I felt for years that I had to like feel shame about, and that I like had this internal struggle with for so many years, where now it's like, no, like I love that. Like I'm proud. Like, yes, this is a queer owned space, and yes, we are out in the world and thriving and surviving and doing all those things. So it is kind of like depends on the day with me too, you know, like some days I don't want to talk about it. Like I don't want to have this big rainbow on my forehead, but other days I'm like, I have the biggest rainbow, bitch, you know, like, so it is like an experience. And I think it just kind of has waves, you know, and I feel like it'll probably be that way for you your entire life, of like ups and downs of what it's going to be for sure. Because you're a senior this year?
I'm a freshman coming to college.
Okay, cool. Okay,
cool.
Congratulations.
What are you going for?
Double major in English and Spanish.
Both of you, top 5 favorite horror movies.
You go first.
And
So
I was
you can copy
informed
'em?
by the horror movie podcast guys, because they know that the well goes pretty deep in terms of what I like, but they felt like my list was, you know, any horror fan's list. But, you know, you like what you like. But my all-time favorite is John Carpenter's Halloween from 78, and also John Carpenter's remake of The Thing. Those are kind of two of my favorites. I think the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original one from the 70s, which that one gets mentioned in the book. I usually put something like Suspiria, Dario Argento.
I've tried to watch Suspiria 3 times. I've fallen asleep every single
original
time.
one,
Yeah. I don't like Giallo.
Okay.
I can't do it.
And especially that one, because it's, you know, people get into that debate all the time. Is it really a giallo because it's supernatural? I'm like, I think you could
make the argument.
I think you make the argument. I don't know. Event Horizon always ends up on my list somewhere. That was a scary one for me in my 20s. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge list. But I think if those are the ones that kind of go to my brain.
Is Bottoms considered horror?
I'm going to give it to you.
Yes. Okay. I would have to say Carrie.
Okay.
Bottoms. I Saw the TV Glow. Love that one.
Very good movie.
Smile 2 is so good. And then The Witch.
Good list. Going to I Saw the TV Glow. How was that? You know, I watched that film, and as a cis man, you know, I understand it. How is that to see that kind of metaphor depiction of the trans experience? How is that to see that on
When I first
film?
watched it, I kind of struggled to relate to it because I just had a completely different experience growing up. Like I've never really battled with that gender dysphoria because I've never really lived as a man before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a struggle relating to it, but after I've watched it several times now, and it's just so like beautiful to see transness depicted in that way,
Mm-hmm.
and how harmful it can be to not live as your true self. And I think it's also a really important message for cis people to watch, because the reviews I've seen are just like, I don't get it. And I think that's kind of the point. You're supposed to be confused. You're supposed to be like a little disturbed because that's how it feels to have gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was really expertly like captured in that movie.
Good. Glowing review. Fantastic.
Yeah,
film.
we watched that together the first time. I was so sad. The ending is incredibly moving and powerful. And yeah, but watching it with you, I think I had the same question afterwards. Like, well, how did you?
How was
like,
that?
And then I always know, like, I think there's another one that we watched called Starfish several years back, but I always know the ones that like grab you because she'll want to kind of come back and talk about them again and again. Maybe we can watch that one again. It's not one that just gets, and that was one YouTube. I'm like, do you think I could borrow? I want to show so-and-so. I saw the TV Glow. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So
Have you seen I Saw the TV Glow? You got to see it. We'll make a movie night.
I'm busy. Working. Yeah, we will make that happen. That sounds like a movie I need to see for sure.
See it.
I have a question, and again, you can, Simone, answer this if you feel comfortable answering it or not. But I feel like a lot of times I see like with the political climate, especially, there's a huge attack on especially the trans community, because we're just hyper focusing on something to distract from other things.
Right.
And right now, trans is an easy target for a lot of people because they just don't understand it. And then I see a lot of fighting within the trans community itself because of that, because it's like, well, we're going to fight. And I feel like so many times there's so many trans people that just feel this need to, appease maybe is the right word, to be like, well, I'm unclockable. I fit in.
Right.
I don't have these weird views. I am hyper feminine or I'm hyper masculine. And like, I'm proving these things. Do you feel like any need to feel in that way of like, I need to be hyper feminine to prove that like my transness is valid? Or are you just like, I'm just me and that's okay. And that's what it is. Does that make sense? And is that okay to ask?
Yeah, for sure. I'm just hyper feminine because I love it. Like, I don't need to prove myself to any Republicans or anybody. It actually kind of makes me uncomfortable when people say, oh, I never even would have known you were trans. Because then I'm like, oh, because that kind of places me in a box outside of my own community. And I don't really know how to enter back in. So yeah, I'm just here. I'm just me.
Yeah. You just do what feels right for you and you're not really concerned with what others think about it.
Right.
Okay, cool. I love that. I
also feel like the comment of, oh, I would have never clocked you is like indicative of, okay, so now you know that I'm trans. So now you are separating me from what you think of cis women.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's never out of like malicious intent. It's their kind of way of complimenting me in my transition, but it's also like taking away from it in a way.
They think it's a big compliment, but really,
I think I'm still, just that made me think of how I react to students who maybe out themselves in writing, or if it's a fictional story where they'll choose queer characters, and I'll catch myself and I have to like, just again, that reframe, like, why is that? And you kind of mentioned this a bit earlier too, like, why is this the thing that, can it just be all businesses are queer friendly, right? And I said, like, and I think it's partly because of, that imprinting growing up when I did, right? That I have to fight against those implicit biases myself, right? That the fact that if a student turns in a paper and there's a lesbian couple in it, then why am I suddenly like, oh yeah, this could be like, no, why does that have to be the central conflict or the central narrative? Why can't it just be, hey, it's a lesbian couple, but then they have to face this? Like, what? Because I wouldn't do that if a student would turn in a paper about, heterosexual couple, right? Like something you wouldn't even consider it. It's like an incidental detail, right? So I still recognize that, kind of about myself, where like you said, oh, I didn't even know you were trans. Like how you have, I have to kind of push against those moments. I guess, in my defense, I'm still pushing against, 20, 30 years of societal messages, right? About this is what's normal, this is what's not. But I'm trying to get better about recognizing that. But yeah, hearing you kind of talk about that just made me think about that.
I think you should write your next book and do a research study on the correlation of English teachers and queer students, because I think there is just some sort of connection with English teachers and queer students, because my teachers that I was closest with in high school were all from the English department. And I feel like that's a lot of queer people's experience of just their English teachers. And actually, when I was in high school, I was definitely not out, but very clearly queer. My junior year English teacher, Miss Carter, had me read The Perks of Being a Wallflower. A subtle hint at like, maybe you might see some resemblance in this. Clocked me big time.
Travis, you're a fag.
Yeah, we got to our senior like ending paper was to write a report on any like person you wanted to. It could be like a celebrity or a famous or whatever, any person. And I chose Christina Aguilera because the Strip album changed my life. So that could have also been a little hint of maybe why she pushed that book my way, but I don't know. So you should do a research on English teachers and the queer experience, because I think they just tend to lean towards them. Yeah.
In fact, I know you can edit this up.
Yeah.
But by any chance?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So, and he was my first year teaching. He was a freshman in my class, and then because of just how things worked, because I taught freshmen, sophomores my first year, sophomore, juniors my second, juniors, seniors. So I ended up kind of following this certain group through, which would never happen again. But anyway, he had sent me years later when that was on Facebook a meme that said like, you know, had this like queer students, English teachers. And it was like this. So it's funny that you said that. And I hadn't thought of that before. Like,
yeah, I'm still close with my high school English teachers and do their hair. So it's just,
that's great.
I don't know. Maybe you probably didn't have that because you were a weird kid.
My high school English teacher is dead. I actually don't know if either of them are dead. Mr. McCann, how are you? How has like this experience of parenting a trans daughter affected how you, has it affected how you approach like teaching, how you approach, you know, maybe queer students or questioning students? Like, how has this affected your teaching career?
Yeah, I think in sort of it started for me being more. I mean, I think the presence of GSA at North, you know, so there was always that, but I think kind of the meta part of it came from taking the queer theory class with Bob Nolan, and then of course the experiences with Simone. And maybe this is part of that English teacher, like that you're just sort of, maybe there's an openness, right? So I think I was always, especially because it had to do with writing. So I've always been someone who's very open to sharing what I'm working on. Like I you know, as a film fan, I'll sometimes say like, you know, good directors always say they're not going to make their actors do something they wouldn't be willing to do. And then they'll, you know, so I said, as a writer, I'm not going to ask you to do anything in this class that I'm not willing to do. So I think there were probably moments that were shared through the context of my writing, which touched upon parenting Simone. And I think there would always maybe be like little conversations, and that would happen outside of class with other students. Excuse me. That made me very aware of like, oh, okay. And I think just being more sensitive to pronouns and addressing that and talking about that. And, what are we reading? So it seems that, you know, we're getting something from maybe a particular lens and kind of calling that out, right? Or maybe as before I wouldn't have, and said, so yeah, this makes sense if you're looking at it through kind of a heterosexualized lens, you know? So I just thought like, if I can, you know, for those who are listening, right, and kind of that's what they're like, okay, so here's maybe someone I can approach and talk to, or like I can feel comfortable about sharing something in writing that maybe I wouldn't with another teacher or whatever. So I think it's just it's made me more sensitive to that, and I think any student who's maybe coming into class, you know, and maybe feeling, you know, marginalized, not just because of gender or sexuality, but, you know, they're about race, or maybe, you know, I would say like I had to speak in front of, I'd never in 20, how many years it was at that point, I'd never spoken at a school board meeting, but when COVID happened and you know, in the wake of that, with, you know, all these sort of book bannings and parents showing up at school board meetings, and I felt compelled to do that. And I think I missed one of your concerts, which but you gave me your blessing. You're like, okay, you're going there to like say something, that's fine. But I had never kind of got him to talk about that. I thought, you know, I think, I had said something about like, it's not really my job to try to like broker a conversation between you and your child about sexuality. But it is my job to kind of make them feel like they are a part, they are welcome, advocate for them. And that goes for the kid wearing a MAGA hat or the kid wearing, you know, the rainbow thing. Like I'm trying to make that space feel welcome for whoever, right, is in that room. But I feel like, parenting you and everything that has sort of come along with it is just maybe more sensitive to how I'm saying things. How am I using language? And I think that's really kind of what it's come down to, right? And I know that's the part that always gets like, really, do I have to say like how hard is that to just say that, like just to be to be nice, to be decent? Like, why are we like, you know, so when woke or like PC or all that they're using sort of like a derogatory way, I'm like, I don't understand, like, is to me those things connote just being, you know, a little more open and aware of how we're using language with each other. And so
I think it's really interesting because I have quite a few clients that are teachers, and I just like have nothing but respect for them because I dabbled in it myself out of college. Or out of high school. That's what I wanted to go to college for, is to be a teacher. Hated every experience with that, but it wasn't for me. But a lot of my clients that I have as teachers, like, again, you're talking about like finding respect and like making the kids feel safe, whether they are wearing the rainbow hat or the mega hat. And like, I think it's just so interesting that a lot of times people are like, look at it as like being a negative thing of like being more woke and more PC. But like, have you found it difficult to have, like, obviously you probably, your viewers are going to push more towards the rainbow kid having that experience, but then like showing understanding to the mega crowd, you know, and like, cause you have to, like, as a teacher, like you can't be like, you're wrong and like hate that kid, you know? And like, I think that's such an interesting experience that like, I feel like times more liberal people have that understanding. And that's just why we're more liberal, is because we are open to many people's viewpoints. And even though we may not agree or even find logical sense in it, we still are open to being like, well, that's your opinion and we can have differing opinions and this is how we like navigate through that. Where a lot of times I feel like people on the other side, I'm not going to say everyone, but like more people who identify as that kind of mega group and Republican standing are just more like, nope, this is how we see it and this is the only way, like this is the path, it's linear, versus like it could be this way. Yeah, like how do you feel as an educator? Like how do you balance that? How do you find your way through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You made me think of, I forget who the author is, but there was an article that I had used in the creative writing elective that talked about how when you're talking about fiction, when you're writing a story, you're going to have your own biases, right? As the writer, but you should try your hardest to let the other side win. They're not, but you should try to like kind of maybe as best you can conceal, right, those biases. And I think I'm, kind of very aware of that, as an educator, and I think that's why I feel like in terms of some of the stuff that I share in class, if it's in the context of writing, it's not coming at them right from like, what's the classic, oh, you're grooming or you're indoctrinating. Like, it's not that. Like, I'm writing about something that's going on in my life, and here's what it is. And I feel like I've always felt that the best part of, storytelling is the way it humanizes all of us, right? And it draws those connections between us. It's so much more difficult to dismiss someone when you know their story than it is like when you're just sniping each other on social media, right, in the comment section, where maybe it's a bot. You might not even be dealing with a person, right? Like who you're arguing with. So, and I just feel like I think of the spaces that you find yourself in as a young person, like, so I think a classroom is maybe one of the, not the last, but one of the last places where you can sort of come together and have this kind of civil discourse. So I think when I'm teaching, I was thinking of a really nice compliment I got paid years ago. There was, I'm also an atheist, and I think it was maybe more important to me kind of before you were around in our lives. Like that was sort of my thing. Like I love to kind of like wanted to stir that up and challenge kids, because I was a Catholic kid growing up, and I had sort of a acrimonious, divorce from it. And
as most Catholics do.
Yes. And I was like, I'm going to find ways to kind of, but I remember a student came up to me years later and said that he had found out that I was an atheist. And he said that really, he's like, finding that out really bothered me, because I had this moment of cognitive dissonance. I said, what was that? And he goes, well, you were just a very nice, genuine person, and I didn't understand how that could exist without. I said, oh, because so I asked him, like, did you ever feel like I was trying to like push upon? He's like, no, that was the other thing. She's like, you never felt like. So I was maybe feeding them texts, and we would have conversations where like we could challenge and question, but they never felt like they had to, get defensive, right, about their position, that they could maybe consider some things, but in a way that they didn't feel like they had to, like retreat from the conversation. So I feel like that's something I'll try to do. We'll have a conversation if a kid maybe brings up a viewpoint. A lot of times, if it's a discussion, other students will keep each other kind of in check with certain things. Well, I don't think that way at all, blah, 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 or I think it could be this. And so I hope that's their takeaway from the class, is that was a place where we just all kind of got to like healthily exchange ideas. And yeah, some of the viewpoints were made different, and even like, well, I'll try to ask the question like, okay, where do you see flaws in this particular argument that the writer is putting forward? So like, so they see I'm not just passing this off as gospel to them, like, because this writer said this, that it's, it's so, but they've got a particular point of view, and this is an interesting idea that I think we can talk about. Like one of the essays in the that I mentioned in the book that I use in class is Deborah Tannen's No Unmarked Woman. It's about a 30-year-old article, but it's still a really fascinating article about the way women are marked and men aren't in certain, well, she would argue that there are spaces where men can go and not have to worry about, what their dress says. And her argument is that women never have that space. Like, even if they're choosing not to wear a certain item or not wear makeup, for example, it's conveying something, whether they intend it to or not. And so that's been a really fascinating discussion, because you'll have some kids who will raise their hand and go, yeah, like some days I went to track practice and I did not put any makeup on. I just didn't feel like it. And my coach was like, are you okay? Is everything okay? You look different. You seem sad. And I was like, what? I just didn't want to, and then you'll get kids who'll be like, well, wait a minute, like, what about this? And so, that's, I guess, what I've been trying to encourage, is that kind of like healthy, discussion around these issues without trying to like, lead them. But sure, like there are times maybe where if I feel like, well, that just seems like, factually, right? Just kind of, so like if I try to bring in, that particular viewpoint. But one thing I have noticed, not to keep interrupted, that's been a struggle more recently, and this is, I think, the world that we've been living in for the last few years, is that I'm finding some students are just, girls in particular, are very reluctant to engage in certain conversations in class, and that's been my biggest challenge. Like, especially if there's an essay that I use that does touch on toxic masculinity, and some kids have come up to me after class and said, like, it's really hard because I look around and some of those toxic males are in this room, like what the article's talking about. And I just, so I mean, there was a day when we were talking, there's the topic of, it was an essay, and it might've been Deborah Tannen's essay. And it was just like 5 or 6 boys who were sort of leading the discussion, and we're talking about something that was predominantly a female issue. And I'm like, and I could not get, some of their perspectives. And then of course that's been very eye-opening to me, and understanding, like, I think one girl said, you have to understand that while yes, we feel comfortable when we're here for 50 minutes, we spend the rest of our day outside of your walls. So I was like, oh yeah. So we have to think about repercussions for things. So anyway, that's just been, not getting off on a side conversation here, but that's been kind of the biggest struggle. And I think it's, again, because of the political climate that we're living in, where it feels like it's, not safe to say things, where 10 years ago, kids were much more open in sort of talking about things that, are now deemed controversial. Not that they weren't then, but now that sort of carries the bad connotation with it, right? Like, we can't talk about race, can't talk about sex, can't talk about gender. So I'll try to make a joke of that sometimes. I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about, transgender, like, and so
spook them all.
Please don't turn me into Linda McMahon and Board of Education. But anyway.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. Like, I get that a lot too in my salon, where we've created a very safe space for people to come in who, most of the people who work there identify in the LGBT community, and then also a majority of our clients that come in do as well. But we also have people that are very Republican that come in, and people are like, well, why would you choose to work on them? And it's just like, well, one, their money spends as good as a Democrat's money, so I will take that at all costs because I have a home to pay for. So there's that. But at the same point, the only way to really actually get people to open their minds and to change their thinking is to not ostracize them, because that's what they're trying to do to you already. So why would you do back to them what they're doing to you? The other thing is just to like give them that experience, to show them that like we're just like you and we're here, and give them that experience and understanding, and to like have those conversations. And it doesn't always just need to be like, every time I see you, I'm going to try to convert you into my thoughts, but like, this is how I think. And maybe like throughout seeing that and experiencing that, you can kind of come to some understanding with it. And it may not completely change them in every way, but it may make them think a little bit more before they speak in the things that they do. And the only way to do that and to create change is to have those conversations and to have those people around you. But so many people just want to ostracize and be like, nope, I don't want anything to do with it because it's different than the way I think, which I understand some people do need to protect their peace at all costs and maybe don't have the gumption or energy to take that on. But the only way to change people is to take that on. And unfortunately, that's just part of being a human being, whether what you believe in or not. So I think it's important. I think that's just really respectable that educators do that every day, all day long, and to have your own personal opinions, but to understand and try to help kids kind of process their own thoughts and come to terms with their own critical thinking versus trying to force your own thoughts on them as well.
That's cool. What it all comes down to is critical thinking, because that's the skills you're really trying to build. And it just so happens that when people start to think critically, they tend to lean towards one end of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm. My friend, a colleague in the English department, I don't think it was his line, but he always said it's because reality has a liberal bias.
Yeah, it really does.
The most important question we need to ask today is, Simone, what is your opinions of drag queens?
Don't even get me started. I love drag queens.
Love that. Okay, good. Now
especially the trans ones.
Right.
They serve it.
The best,
Yes.
Okay. I don't, you may not even be aware of this, but when I first started doing drag 16 years ago, there was a huge,
sorry, Simone, how old were you 16 years ago?
Born. Just born.
3? Almost 3. 2, almost 3.
Love that so
just
very much.
Just one of them.
Thanks. Yep. Chance loves to talk about how old I am. So there was actually like a big riff in the community between the drag, and there was a few like pretty out trans people at that time. And there was like a clear divide of like, you're either trans or you're either drag, and like, we do not get along. And it was like a really like actually like notable rift of like, it was just so uncomfortable, and I just never understood it. And then I think like in the last like 6 years or so, there's been like a very like clear merging, I would say, of it. And it's just been really awesome to, because we have a lot of really amazing trans people in this community that I don't think most people realize that there are so many trans people in this community that are just really out there surviving and thriving and doing great in this community. And it's really awesome to see like that coming together as something that doesn't need to be such a divide and a rift. And I don't know where it came from, because it was, I feel like we were together in a community, and then like maybe politically or something happened that kind of made it be like, you need to like identify as one thing or another. You know, they're always trying to separate us, and that's how they come in and divide us, is through things like that. But yeah, I don't know if have you ever had like an experience with that? Do you like feel like people try to be like, oh, you're a drag queen, you know, like, do they try to like identify you as that? I feel like that's something that a lot of trans people deal with too. Like, are you sure you're not just a drag queen, or like, you're not just a, you know, cross dresser, or whatever the terms may use?
I think that might have been closer to when I started my transition, more like people who were hesitant, because being trans and being 9 wasn't really a thing when I started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think now, because I transitioned so young, I think just people don't really see me as a cross-dresser. I think they see me more so as a woman as opposed to a trans woman, which has its own issues. But yeah,
it is such an interesting thing of just like how things change and people change, and the different things in society and how we identify and all those different things. So I'm glad that you've had a good experience in that. And
yeah,
I love that you love drag queens. Do you have a favorite drag queen?
Aja.
Okay. Love that.
I
It's
love
a good choice.
Aja.
Okay.
Sickening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So are you a Drag Race fan then?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And I'm indoctrinating.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, you brought me in.
Who's your favorite drag queen?
You liked Anya,
I did.
because that's the only season that he's watched.
Simone, is there anything that like we'll probably have some listeners who don't know you and don't know your story. Is there anything that you like in particular want to share, or any experience that you want to talk about, or anything that you want to say that while you have attention of people who may not know your situation?
I said this on WPR, but I think just for any families who are going through something similar is to just lead with more an open heart. Don't immediately jump to like news articles or like your thoughts in your head of like the anxieties. Just love your kids. Take it slow if you need to, but always lead with love first and not like any fear or anything like that.
Andy, is it prefer? Okay. So with your book, for those of our listeners who probably maybe not have heard of this, this is fairly recently came out with this in the last few months or so. What should they look for in the book? And then like, what do you want them to know about the book? Why should they buy this book? Like, what's the kind of, I know it's like a guide of experiencing your stories. Is there anything in particular that they should take from it, and what should get them into it?
Sure. I think, I mean, as we were talking earlier, made me think of like how the early drafts, there was a tendency to want to make it more, I think there's maybe some anger or but then I realized that could be, right, those things that sort of like, you know, maybe are off-putting to it's not necessarily inviting a reader, and it's maybe encouraging those defenses. So I've kind of deliberately kind of removed, you know, certain references to administrations and things. But anyway, it's really, it's meant to be just a story about one family, because I know that, you know, the trans experience is going to be very, I don't know that. I'm not trans, but I assume like this experience is going to be different for various families and individuals. So I'm not trying to I wasn't trying to put a story out there that was somehow like, you know, a definitive or anything like that. It was really just one family story of, you know, how we were navigating this. And, more than anything, just wanted it to humanize the issue. So we can just kind of, I think as you get into the book, you see us just as a family, as people, and maybe the trans thing is there, but maybe it starts to kind of fade a little bit. And you just see this as a family going through. So I feel like if you are, parents who, maybe have a situation similar, right, to ours with Simone, that there may be something that you can get out of that. I also feel like if you're not, like, just it's just a story about a family, and I do not at like one moment profess to know anything about the right way to go about this, and that's kind of where the title came from. The title is actually something I struggled with.
I tried so hard to change it.
What would you have called it?
The original, that was like kind of the idea, was transparent.
I
love that.
With the dash in there.
I loved that. I don't know.
There were two things with that. One was there was a TV show. I think had just ended its run, called Transparent, and then another was a student came up to me because I was still going with that title and said, "Oh, so are you trans and a parent?" I'm like, "No."
That's a fair point.
I'm like, "I'm parent of a trans." "Oh yeah, that is confusing, right?" And I think then and then it started to feel like trans anything is just too on the nose, and then it was I didn't know what to call it for a long time, and I was writing a query letter that I was going to send out to agents and then to publishers. And in the opening paragraph, I used that adjective. This is a book that talks about, thwarted expectations and clumsy love. And I'm like, oh, like that, the phrase just kind of stuck. And I was like, I kind of like that. And I ran it by Adrian, and I met some friends, and yeah, you and Geeta were pretty vocal. Well, you should change that title, but I just feel like that's I wasn't trying to come off as any kind of super parent. I mean, there were a lot of mistakes and revelations and insights along the way, so I just felt like maybe that could be a relatable entry point for someone coming at this at the book. So and to your point about like the tendency to want to, because I feel that like unfriend, that you have a different viewpoint, right? But I did get a message from someone I've known since elementary school who read the book, and I think we're on different sides of the political spectrum. But the comment was, "This got me to think about this issue in a way I haven't before." So she's like was bravo. And I'm like, oh, okay. So there's an argument to be made for like maybe not unfriending, right? The people who, because maybe again, through the power of storytelling, right, you can start to kind of, hear those different viewpoints, and yeah, maybe you're still a conservative, but maybe on this issue, right, you start to kind of like see that it's more complex than what it's reduced to, right, on social media and in the pundits. So,
and that person was Derek Van Orden. And Derek Van Orden is trans now.
I actually love the title. I think it's great. I think one thing, as just in people in general, not just as a parent of trying to go through this experience, is like we really are harsh on ourselves, and we do need to like just take the moment to realize we're all just people learning, and we're all just people trying to go through this experience of life, and we all grow and we all change and we all learn new things, and to allow ourselves that grace to be like, this isn't a linear path. We got to figure it out as we go. So I just think it's really awesome that you have, as a cis white male, taken this on and have just really like embraced your child and showed them love and are growing and learning with them as you're growing and learning just as a person, and figuring out your journey as just a young adult, and to just give yourself that grace. And we all need to do that too. And there's many things in my life that I wish I would have done differently, but it's all led to the path of where I'm at now. And I think that that's important. And so Clumsy Love's a great title. I love it.
My own experience is because I would define myself as a heterosexual, cis male. But that doesn't always, and this is one of the things I've kind of learned too in writing the book and reflecting on my own past, like doesn't always sit comfortably. And I think that goes back to the Judith Butler stuff about gender being performative, right? And sort of in danger of always undoing that performance. And so there's a chapter that talks about kind of a couple things when I was younger, with males in particular, where I sort of became aware of like, oh, that was a potential, sexual moment where, whoa. And I didn't, my impulse at that age was just to kind of like, recoil from it. But in reflecting and writing about the book, I was like, wow, so there's this sense of like, maybe there's, kind of picking up on in the people who seemed most sort of like heteronormative, there seemed to be that potential, right, for that queerness, right, could, but and that's probably true for a lot of people. Like I think back to, I'm blanking on the name of the continuum of sexual.
Kinsey.
Thank you. Right. The Kinsey report, right. That's probably, this is reality, not boom.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, we often try to like align ourselves, right, to one or the other. So, yeah. So, I've certainly kind of, in addition to all the things, like kind of learned parenting Simone. I think it was me kind of even coming to terms with like, certain memories, right, I had with certain friends, kind of growing up, and what did that mean? So
yeah, it's a learning path.
I just really appreciate both of you for like what you're doing, what you have been doing with the podcast, and it's awesome to be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is, I think, when I was thinking about in terms of how to, who to reach out to talk about, this was like the top of the list. So I was so excited when I got that reply back, and if for anything, just to like kind of connect with you, because I felt like I've known who you are, but because we didn't necessarily have that connection in high school, it just always seemed sort of like awkward or like, hey, so
be thankful you didn't know me in high school. I was a monster. So, and I learned that at the reunion. So just be very thankful you did not cross paths with me until now, when I'm a much nicer person. Yeah. Clumsy love. That's what I'm just going to call it from now on. Just clumsy love.
Yeah, I think that's a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Andy and Simone, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Thank you for having
both.
us.
Again, the book is called Clumsy Love, A Father's Journey, Parenting His Transgender Daughter, available wherever fine books are sold. Words are not my strong suit today, and I produce a podcast, so
love that.
Yeah. Okay, bye. Small Town Big Gays is hosted by Travis Gorell and me, Chance Smith. Our music is 1 AM by TYB. You can check out his music. Links are in the episode description. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at STBG Pod. Find us on Facebook if you're a Facebook person. Email us at smalltownbiggays@gmail.com. And for more shit from me, Chance, go to strangehavens.com.
It's been nice